Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, a new report shows there's been little to no progress to curb corruption in the Pacific. Also,
they have to be very, very careful in terms of fire safety. Make sure that their children are not given the opportunity to play around with matches.
Fiji house fires leave 16 families without a place to live. And later on, PNG's soaring population raises some questions. Transparency International says efforts to curb corruption in the Pacific are stagnating. Its 2023 Corruption Perception Index report, released this week, shows another year of little to no meaningful progress towards curbing corruption in the Asia-Pacific region. Out of the 180 countries surveyed, 6 are from Oceania. Koroi Hawkins reports.
According to the index, New Zealand is the least corrupt country in the region, sitting in the top 3 in the world. Next is Australia at rank 14, followed by Fiji at 53, Vanuatu 61, Solomon Islands 70, and Papua New Guinea ranked lowest in the Pacific at 133. Transparency's Pacific advisor, Mariam Matthew, says countries in the region have fluctuated around the same positions for several consecutive years. She says even in a wider survey of people from 14 Pacific countries, many felt corruption was allowed to go unpunished.
Close to half of the respondents in the region believed that corrupt officials never or rarely face consequences, basically, for their actions. So there's low trust in there being justice against corrupt acts.
Although Solomon Islands scored 1 point more than it did in the last index report, the chief executive of Transparency Solomon Islands, Ruth Lilongula, says corruption is still a big problem.
For this year, I think we're more one point up, but that is not significant. We have not made much in the way of progress in the fight against corruption, especially government struggling with its efforts to fight corruption.
Ms. Lilongula says the last time Solomon Islands made a significant step forward in the fight against corruption was in 2018 when Parliament passed a new anti-corruption bill.
What we can take from that, the positive, is that we have not fallen down, going down. We have maintained it to the stagnant score, but still we have a very highly corrupt public sector, and we do agree with that.
Papua New Guinea was ranked the lowest in the Pacific, and for the second consecutive year it has tracked downwards in the index. The chairperson of Transparency PNG, Peter Aitzi, says one of the biggest drivers of corruption in the country is the lack of accountability around the awarding of government contracts.
It does create opportunities for people to perhaps, if you like, induced or bribed or preferential contracts given to people for kickbacks. And as a result, possibly we get the kind of outcomes we are seeing, which is lack of real meaningful impact in terms of some of those large-scale projects that we are trying to fund.
But Peter Aitzi says despite their low ranking, there have been some positive efforts to curb corruption in the country, such as the establishment of an independent commission against corruption, or ICAC.
Look, I am encouraged by the establishment of ICAC. And I'm also encouraged by a group of champions within government itself that are demonstrating courage in this type of environment where we've got a breakdown of the system.
In the overall rankings, Denmark and Finland share the top spot as the least corrupt of the 180 countries surveyed, while Somalia sits at the bottom for the second year running as the most corrupt.
Fijians are being urged by authorities to be extra cautious following 18 house fires in the country this month. Fiji's National Fire Authority says 67 people have been left displaced and thankfully no injuries or deaths were reported. Although the blazes have caused an estimated $1.5 million Fijian dollars in damage. Alicia Foon spoke with Fire Authority Chief Executive Mau Sowane, who urged people to take heed to her safety advice and to keep lighters and matches away from children.
This year we have already received reports of 18 fires. So we received 9 in the Central Division, 8 in the West and 1 in the Northern Division. 16 families that are homeless now. Normally 33% of the total causes of fires are from electrical, and then there is the highest one is electrical, and then arson is the second major, and then goes on to other causes of fires. That is the major. Right now, for the 18, we are still investigating into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many people have been displaced?
Right now, for January, we have 67 people who are already displaced from all these fires. 67.
And what kind of support are these people receiving? And 67 is quite a large number, but are we talking entire families? And how's the government supporting these people? Do you know?
Yes, the government, they have a policy in place to support our the fire victims. We have there's a $5,000 that is there. If they qualify, they will get that $5,000 immediately to help them to rebuild their homes.
What is your message around safety to people, considering this is such a concerning number of residential fires?
They have to be very, very careful in terms of fire safety. Particularly when they are staying around home, they have to make sure that their children are not given the opportunity to play around with matches. And one of the 18 here is that one of the child was playing around with a lighter, gas lighter, and that's how the fire started. We urge people to be very careful when they are around their home, particularly with their children, and when they also leave their homes, they make sure that all their electrical appliances are turned off. The major thing is the electrical. To look into electrical, they must make sure that they have qualified electrician to attend to their electrical works and to do their wirings and all that. Because in some of the areas where we identified that the fire actually started from using old electrical wires and all that. So they need to have qualified electrician to look into their electrical works in terms of wiring.
And what is the cost of the damage?
The cost of the damage for the 18 is roughly about 1.5 million, according to the estimate that has been done on the ground. Some of the homes that have been destructed by the fires from the 18, I believe one was insured, but the rest was not insured. My advice to people who will listen is to at least, it will be very expensive initially, but in the long run, it will save lives and also save their property if they try to use fire-rated material to build their homes, and also use the qualified electrician to do wiring.
Papua New Guinea's population is soaring, raising questions about how these people can get educated, find work or receive health services. The National Research Institute has proposed a National Youth Service Corps, but Don Wiseman spoke with our PNG correspondent Scott Waide about the extent of the growth and what, if anything, is being done about it.
Papua New Guinea is growing at a rapid rate, and the population, it's increasing exponentially, it would seem, because not so long ago we were talking about 7 or 8 million people. Now we're talking about a population of 11 plus, and projections for it to reach 21 in the fairly near future. How prepared is the government? How prepared are they for this surge in young people?
Look, Don, I can't give a blanket answer, but you can see the symptoms of a dysfunctional statistical system that we have in Papua New Guinea. The census hasn't been properly done, and you can also see the symptoms of that problem in the health sector in particular, because you've got facilities that are overwhelmed by patients, new babies being born every day, and the nurses are overworked, the doctors are overworked. You've got a mental health system that's struggling to cope. So just looking at the health sector, you can already see the problems there. I was talking to the Health Secretary, Dr. Osborne Liko, just over the weekend, and he was talking about how the health sector is struggling to deal with problems in other sectors of government, and in particular the data that's supposed to be generated and supplied by the government statistical office, the Electoral Commission and all that. The health department just doesn't have that adequate data to plan for the future. And that's on the side of health. You look at education as well. We've got kids being enrolled in schools. There was one report of a new high school in Port Moresby that just didn't have classrooms for students. So all of that put together they're just symptoms of a large, very disturbing problem.
It's due, of course, to a lack of money, isn't it? A lack of resources. Clearly, health needs a lot more money thrown at it. The census is meant to occur this year, isn't it? Finally, after 10 years, is it?
Yes, the census is supposed to happen this year. Now, the Prime Minister has gone out and issued a statement saying that, the census has to happen. Really not necessary for the Prime Minister to go out and say that, make a political statement, because the systems are supposed to take care of that part of the issue. But the Prime Minister has felt the need to go out and make a statement to that effect, and it just reflects that lack of confidence in the system kicking into action and having the resources to actually make it happen. It's worrying that the Prime Minister has had to make that statement. A lot of people are looking at when the census will happen, and it's very worrying for us.
Now, the surging population, Papua New Guinea's family size has, I think, been around 6 people for a long time, hasn't it? Are there any indications that families are getting smaller in PNG? What sort of effort is going in the country in terms of family planning?
Look, there are efforts in pockets. Some communities have gone ahead and issued warnings about large families, controlling their family sizes. But as a holistic approach in terms of government, there's very little efforts being put into telling people to have their numbers of children being born controlled, family planning methods being actively distributed. You've got non-government organizations like Marie Stopes who are actively trying to encourage people to go on birth control. But it's not a widespread effort as many people would like to see. And it's already impacting on, say, for example, in the last 30 years, it's already impacted on families, the family support structure that Papua New Guineans have. And people are trying to rely on that family structure, and it's burdening that system also.
When you think in terms of burdens, one of the dramatic illustrations, I suppose, was the recent rioting and looting involving a lot of young people, unemployed young people, with very few prospects. And over the ensuing years, that presumably the country's going to be faced with more and more of these not necessarily well-educated, certainly unemployed young people.
We've seen this trend of young people not getting the education that they need. Education costs are high. That's a huge, huge burden to families and relatives of those people who are employed. They try to educate people in the villages to not have as many children, because that burden will eventually end up at their doorstep. But it's difficult. And as you rightfully said, the rioting that we had in Port Moresby, a lot of the people who were actually involved in the riots, their ages ranged between 15 and 25. Very young people going out and looting the shops, burning the shops. That in itself is a whole huge, huge problem. You look at the statistics of, and this is particularly in Ley City where I live, the numbers of young men ending up in prison for drug offenses, alcohol abuse. It ranges from 15 to 25, that age group. And the number of people being killed by police during armed holdups, 15 to 25, some very young. So yes, it's very worrying.
Among the political leaders, is anyone commenting? Is anyone raising the alarm?
I've seen Alan Bird speaking about it very publicly. A few have raised the alarm. The Deputy Prime Minister has been actively talking about it in Ley. But, MPs can talk about it, but you need a very decisive approach from government, like an active campaign, telling people to just not have any more children. If you have 1 or 2, that's enough. It's a very difficult decision politically to go out and say it, because of a lot of people against family planning or viewing family planning with some skepticism, not too sure about venturing into that area. A lot of people, whenever there's discussions about family sizes, there's always this response, okay, it's my business, it's not your business, it's not even the government's business. So there has to be a lot of education, there has to be a lot of awareness, and it's a huge, huge task.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnzi.com/programs. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio podcasts. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, till Fāsui Fua.